August 1st, Ukrainian ballistic missiles strike Moscow.
Shrapnel went flying.
The third phase of Special Operation Web.
I love this.
Russian Navy generals are currently being blown up.
Are you filming?
Yes!
Holy shit! Wow! Fuck me. Fuck! What a really big fucker.
FSB agents' cars are blowing up in Moscow.
More and more. They moved the car away over there.
Moscow airports are closed. Sabotage and shooting near the Kremlin. Muscovites are in panic. Evacuation has begun.
What is going on? The police officers are running.
The rockets keep coming and coming. Boom! That's an explosion. Bada boom. The SBU is preparing new sabotage operations on Russian territory.
Girls! We're fucked!
Moscow, St. Petersburg, please get ready to evacuate immediately.
Is it 3:46 or something? The sirens started blaring. Thank you to our dear authorities for our cloudless life.
Breaking news, friends. Sabotage and shooting at the Kremlin. The conspirators have been caught. Moscow airports are closed. Ukrainian ballistic missiles and Western rockets are heading for Moscow.
That's right, that's right. No panic, folks.
Look. Petersburg, Moscow, the Kremlin. Get ready. We'll discuss all this with top analyst Oleksandr Demchenko right now. There is constant chaos at Moscow airports because here's an infographic of Moscow airport closures over the past 6 days. It's just terrible. Absolutely terrible. Vnukovo was closed 9 times, Sheremetyevo 4 times, and both Domodedovo and Zhukovsky 20 times each. Indeed, Muscovites are in a panic. How do you assess the attacks on Moscow, the Kremlin, Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo in general?
I think that German missiles, and not just German ones, are flying toward Moscow and St. Petersburg, toward the major cities of the Russian Federation. I believe that the area near the Russian General Staff on Frunzenskaya, which is close to Arbat, will go up in flames. I think other important locations will also catch fire, even Red Square, which for some reason Putin and his entire entourage have been making a fuss about lately. Why do we need to talk about this, Dasha? Because a real turning point has occurred. This is a turning point. This is a new phase of the war, a new stage. Everyone has perfectly understood that Putin is not just crazy, as Donald Trump said, but that Putin has no intention of backing down and is only going to escalate the situation, escalating it every single day. That's why I assume that the Germans, the French, the British, and the Americans, on top of everything, lost their patience and gave Ukraine permission to strike Russia with anything possible. And from the very beginning, when they gave this permission, they expected that the strikes would be specifically on the territory of Moscow. It is likely that a decision has been made in Europe to destroy and sabotage everything possible in Russia, especially in the capital, because they believe that if massive strikes rain down on Moscow, it will somehow change the course of the war and affect the people of Moscow. The capital will groan, and it might make the Russian elite stir a little and perhaps take a closer look. What exactly is Vladimir Putin doing, and is this war really necessary or not? Let's not rule out a strike on Rubliovka either, because if something flies toward Moscow, whether it reaches its target or not, there's Rubliovka along the way, as well as other elite cottages and settlements. So anything could happen, and a strike on Rubliovka in the near future is also something we can't rule out. But what's important to note here is something else. It's clear that if there are massive missile strikes, and we know that Russians like to shoot down drones and missiles even over kindergartens. Just look, recently a passenger plane was almost shot down by Putin. A passenger plane was flying by. It was hit, struck, and almost shot down. Fortunately, everyone survived and nothing happened. Well, it's a good thing for them, obviously. Recently, someone even shot at Putin. You see, on one hand, they shoot at a passenger plane, and now they're shooting at Putin. But who gave it away? Who leaked Vladimir Putin's travel logistics? Then we have to talk about the fact that there are conspirators in the Kremlin, that there is a group among Putin's security in the FSO, among the security officers at Lubyanka, Putin's guards, yes, among those close to Putin, the elite who want him dead and who secretly pass the coordinates to Ukraine. Moreover, there is another very important point that we know. We know, as reported just recently by the British publication The Economist, that Ukraine and its allies have embedded algorithms into drones, just as Russia is now programming drones. So, as I understand it, there are engineers at Russian defense enterprises who are against the war, who take and send embedding algorithms, codes, modern-day Enigma for crying out loud into drones, sending out exactly how Putin makes drones. In other words, what we're seeing is a massive act of sabotage happening inside Russia. Then I just look at the news, I simply watch the news. Belgorod region. A railway, a huge stretch of track has been destroyed. In the Tula region, a railway, the track itself has been destroyed today, right at this very moment. What does this mean? It means that Ukraine is disrupting Putin's summer offensive. I think it will be thwarted in the coming days, within a week, because this is the connection to the Kursk region, specifically the Tula-Kursk route. This is, of course, a direct connection to the border area. In other words, this is about minimizing and neutralizing any further offensive in the Kharkiv direction, and accordingly in the Sumy direction. Essentially, what we're talking about is the beginning of a series of large-scale, massive sabotage operations on the territory of the Russian Federation from the border regions toward Moscow, in order to completely neutralize any of Putin's opportunities and destroy any margin of safety in terms of a summer offensive. In other words, Ukraine is disrupting Vladimir Putin's summer offensive by every possible means. And I am confident that the partisan movement, which was created both before the war and during these last 3.5 years of this large-scale war, is operating and doing so very cohesively. Because if there are massive explosions on the railways and tracks in the Russian Federation, the offensive and military operations will simply stall. This has already happened in history. You see, in African countries, a massive railway attack, explosions on the railways. And this has always had a very significant impact on the course of military operations and on the progress of offensives. A very strong impact. That's why German missiles, and not just German ones, we know that everyone has given permission. The French, the British, and even Trump has turned a blind eye to it, will fly over Russia, including over Moscow and St. Petersburg. This will significantly change the war and alter the attitude of the capital toward this war. I think Muscovites are not like people from Rostov. They're not Uyghurs, you understand? They're not Uyghurs, not Bashkirs, sorry, not all the other guys. These are people who will definitely start to tremble, who will clearly look and think, what is this Putin doing? And I think the Kremlin and Russian elite will also start to tremble a lot. They're already trembling because Putin, see, Shoigu says he's cold and lonely. Patrushev has been silent lately. Medvedev basically never puts down the bottle together with Gerasimov and Mashka Zarova. They're probably drinking as a threesome. So this will have an impact. Massive sabotage operations in the near future will affect the course of the war. As I've been saying for many weeks now, we're entering a new phase of this war is beginning for us. When Trump's peace initiative called Minsk III, a plan to freeze the war, was undermined by Russia, today it is convening a Security Council meeting to discuss how the West is disrupting peace negotiations. Russia is such a peace-loving agent, you see? Russia is trying to achieve peace, but the West keeps sabotaging everything. But in reality, we all understand perfectly well that Putin has no intention of making peace. He isn't planning to present any real plan for resolving this war, the hostilities, or anything else. This will be a disruption, and a new stage of the war begins where everyone now realizes and accepts that there will be no resolution for years to come. This is going to last a long time, and it's necessary to significantly raise the stakes in order to rein in the Kremlin dictator.
Dear audience, please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dasha Schastliva. In the comments, write what you think about the fact that Vnukovo, Sheremeyevo, and other Moscow airports have been closed 20 times in the past 6 days, about our unprecedented drone attacks on Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other regions, and let's say, about how good it will be for Muscovites and residents of St. Petersburg when towers start flying toward the two capitals of the Russian Federation. Sasha, regarding what Merkel said, she really did say that this will last a long time. And what about Trump's mood? Well, Trump made a statement that, in my opinion, was actually quite mild. He called Putin crazy. Well, he said that he was crazy, yes, and nothing followed after that. Then I read that Warren Buffett writes that Trump might impose sanctions this week, or he might not. Let's talk about that.
He might impose them, but not the ones people expected, right? Not those. Look, Dasha, it's actually very simple. If the Americans suddenly find the courage and impose 50% tariffs on Russian oil and petroleum products, gas and uranium, the Russian economy will essentially be under an embargo, completely shut off, right? Then we could say that Russia would only have a month or two left to continue the war. In other words, this war would end quickly. It would end as soon as tomorrow if Putin were to face this. But they aren't willing to do that. Lindsey Graham can come to Istanbul, he can leave Istanbul, he can shout, he does whatever he wants. Trump isn't willing to do it either. Well, fine. Maybe he'll introduce the 17,000th package of sanctions. The 17th package, the 18th package, some other package. It doesn't matter at all. It makes no difference whatsoever. This won't stop Vladimir Putin. There are many ways to restrain, to contain Vladimir Putin. Both Europe and America have these means. And a real sanctions mechanism with these tariffs, with a full oil embargo, and with measures to directly lower oil prices. Of course, this also means blocking certain straits, negotiating with Turkey so that no components are supplied to the Russian Federation and no goods are delivered either through Central Asian countries or through Turkey. It will be more complicated with China, of course, but there are other countries where dual-use and non-dual use goods are shipped. There are plenty of opportunities to really hit Russia, but they aren't taking them, even though they themselves are preparing for war. I mean, the Europeans, the Poles are preparing for war very seriously, and so on. Right now, many people are concerned. What will happen in Belarus? You see, okay, Trump. With Trump, everything is clear. Trump talks more about how during a round, well, on the golf course, a goose bit his special envoy Litkov on the balls, and then he posted that photo. Than he does about what's actually happening with Putin and why he can't manage to make a deal with Putin. That's what he doesn't talk about. Putin has lost his mind. Well, fine, he's lost his mind. So what next? Everyone knows this. Everyone has understood it. Everyone has known it for a long time. Everyone knows it's impossible to make a deal with him. So what next? But no steps have been taken. So what were we told next? We were told that if nothing works out this week and Trump imposes sanctions and they don't work, they won't work because once again they'll be toothless, then Trump will withdraw from the negotiations. Well, that's exactly what the two of them want. Trump wants to get as far away from this as possible because he doesn't want to be seen as a loser or a failure. He doesn't want, figuratively speaking, to end up with a second Afghanistan for himself, like how Biden ran away from Afghanistan. He doesn't want that kind of situation for himself on a global scale, and this would be an even worse situation for America. And Putin wants Trump to leave so that America stops helping anyone, neither Ukraine nor Europe. He wants the situation to become even more complicated because Putin believes that then he'll definitely tighten the screws everywhere. He'll definitely push through everything and everyone. I'm very concerned about what's happening now in the north and what will happen. I mean, the military West 2025 exercises on the territory of Belarus. You know that they spoke with Lukashenko, Putin and Lukashenko, literally yesterday. He thanked him for the 1,000 for 1,000 exchange that Lukashenko organized on the border with Ukraine. It's all nonsense. What it's really about is putting more pressure on Lukashenko and most likely sending as many of their military groups as possible into Belarus. And then it all depends on how things play out. They could attack Kiev or Chernihiv from the north. No one is ruling out such a threat. I think that after 2022 and February, you'd have to be completely, well, blind or deaf not to understand that this threat could really exist, that Putin could go for it again. Last time, he failed with his blitzkrieg. Why do we think that this time he wouldn't want to try another blitzkrieg, correcting some mistakes, working things out? But on the other hand, of course, no one is ruling out further provocations from Belarusian territory against Lithuania or some other Baltic countries or Poland. The Poles are preparing very seriously, and so are the Lithuanians. And in general, we have to acknowledge one thing. Europe has finally switched to a war footing. Europe is now in a state of war, and sooner or later, a big war will break out. And we will see European fighter jets bombing Moscow and other major cities of the Russian Federation because this confrontation is inevitable. Putin cannot take a step back. In that case, his own people would simply remove him. He cannot do that. And the Europeans cannot surrender because they understand what a colossal threat it would be for them if Putin occupies all of Ukraine, and he does want to occupy it. Trump has said this, Medvedev has said this, and in fact, Putin himself has essentially said it as well.
Sasha, can Graham go along with Blumenthal? In other words, can the Senate de facto go against the administration's policy, override Trump's veto, and pass a bill by majority vote that would become law imposing hellish sanctions on the Russian Federation?
They can, but they really want to get something from the White House. They really want to get some contracts. They really want to get some preferences for their firms and companies. They really want to make money off something too, and so on. If I remember correctly, Graham has been introducing hellish sanctions against Russia for many, many years now, about 7 years. Where are these hellish sanctions? This is not the first bill authored by Graham threatening Russia with hellish sanctions, but there are no hellish sanctions. Not from Graham, nor from anyone else. They come up with one package after another. I've come to a thought, a very important one, I think. What if these guys at the beginning of 2023 had given everything to Ukraine, imposed hellish sanctions against Putin, allowed them to strike with long-range missiles, even ATACMS, helped Ukraine with drone production? Russia would already have lost by now and be down for the count. And we would be talking about what is happening in Russia, how it is being restructured, how it is falling apart, how the elite are fighting among themselves, how the empire is collapsing. But that didn't happen. Not during Prigozhin's coup, not amid the confusion and turmoil among the elites after the failed blitzkrieg, not during the tightening of sanctions or the first blows of sanctions against Putin. Nothing happened. It wasn't Ukraine that missed the moment. Obviously, Ukraine couldn't have produced that many missiles, shells, ammunition, and so on. It's just that by and large, the West was cowardly and continues to be cowardly. Everything that's happening now, all this blood, all this guilt, aside from Putin, because Putin is, of course, guilty. Putin is a murderer in this sense. Yes, he kills people. Russians kill people. They occupy territories. They destroy homes. They rape. They loot. They abduct children. But those comrades who didn't help all this time, who blocked aid and support. This is also the doing of Trump and his team back then in the US Congress, who were constantly delaying the provision of ammunition to Ukraine. And they were dithering with the Schultz government. Remember? Should we give TAURUS missiles or not give TAURUS or not? And should we give Leopard tanks or not give Leopard tanks? And so on, and so on, and so on. So while they were hesitating, Putin increased both the number of drones and missiles, made deals with the Iranians, got North Korean shells and artillery, and even sent North Koreans, those dogs, to fight against Ukraine. That's why we have the situation we have right now. And this turning point in the war should have started much, much earlier. Let's put it that way, much earlier. It's only happening now, but only now is Europe starting to catch up. And I have a big question. Will it actually catch up?
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The fact that Merz came out and said that this war will last a very, very long time means that Europe has officially admitted its own powerlessness against Russia. Because if Europe were to impose the sanctions that actually need to be imposed right now, disconnecting everything from SWIFT, embargoes on oil, gas, uranium, gold, and others, remember what Chichvarkin said, that if Europe imposes a certain package, those 5 points, then Russia would simply collapse and its economy would collapse too. But Europe didn't do that. So Merz is officially admitting their own powerlessness, basically saying, we can't do anything, so Russia will keep fighting Ukraine, attacking Ukraine for many, many more years.
I don't know, maybe Merz is or isn't, but he's not as impotent as, say, Scholz. You see what I mean, right? There's really no need to overthink it. All you actually need to do is just take 2 actions. You could do a lot more, but there are 2 things that need to be done. Block the Danish Straits so that no Russian ships, neither shadow nor non-shadow, can travel in any direction selling this semi-legal oil. That's the first thing. That alone would practically bring everything in Russia to a halt. Everything would just collapse. And the second thing is a blockade of Kaliningrad, an economic blockade and a military blockade of Kaliningrad. What would Putin do then? Would he go up against NATO? Would he start a war, an actual war? Would he go after the Finns? Would he move against Poland? What would he do? Right now, when all his forces are concentrated on Ukraine, if these things happened, he would surrender. Because the loss of Kaliningrad, which was handed over to his first and only wife, who now goes by the surname Ocheretina, but back then was Putin Lyudmila, she currently oversees the Kaliningrad region. That would be a huge blow to him. A huge one. Kaliningrad is not Rostov. It's an important center for Russia. It's a separate concentration of troops, it's a military grouping, and so on. It would be a colossal defeat if the Baltic fleet were forced to head towards St. Petersburg. It would be a colossal defeat if the entire region were blockaded and all routes for delivering goods, any goods, humanitarian or otherwise, were completely cut off. And that's it. And the Danish Strait would be closed. That would be enough to make him back down, drop all his ultimatums, and sign a peace agreement. Yes, that peace agreement would only last for 3 or 4 years. But that's a pause that absolutely everyone would need in this situation. Ukraine, the West, including not just Russia. But that's not happening.
Residents of the Suwalki corridor are leaving in fear of a Russian invasion, reports Bill. Amid rising tensions, residents of the strategically important Suwałki corridor have begun to leave the region en masse. This was reported by the German newspaper Bild. It is noted that this narrow strip of land, 65 kilometers between Poland and Lithuania, which separates Belarus and Kaliningrad, is a vulnerable spot in NATO's defense. And the military believes that in the event of a conflict with armed Russia, they could strike from both sides. Russian artillery capable of firing over 30 kilometers covers the entire Suwałki corridor. What do you think?
Let me ask, where is the army? Where is their unified army that they keep talking about? All right, there is no unified army. They don't even want to send the peacekeeping forces and contingents to Ukrainian Lviv. They're afraid, they're cowards. To Odessa and so on. All right, so where is the army? The British, French, German armies? Where are the Swedish systems and fighter jets and artillery? Where is the Finnish artillery? Where is the defense? To completely neutralize any potential threat from Russia and Belarus, we must be prepared. So there are a huge number of questions, not just, well, okay, let's evacuate people. What happens next? Obviously, this is the road to Kaliningrad, a land corridor to Kaliningrad. But it's a narrow strip, yes, which could separate the Baltic countries from Poland, obviously, cut them off. But this strip is extremely vulnerable, even in the event of an advance by Russian troops. And it's not for nothing that Sweden was made a party, a NATO member, and so on. Gotland Island, and so on and so forth. All of this didn't just happen by chance, but even that isn't enough now. You see, we can just express our outrage, we can discuss it. That's all. These are obvious things.
Of course.
The question is, now a new stage of the war is beginning, a new phase. So what comes next? For Ukraine, it's clear what comes next. This war will last a long time. Putin doesn't want to make peace until he faces problems with the economy. That's one. With human resources, that's two. And directly in military terms, that's three. He will keep going until then. His economy will likely collapse by the end of this year. Everyone is already saying there will be a recession, there will be a downturn, and they'll have to do something about it. This will affect the defense industry. What will happen to oil prices? We'll see. Most likely they will also collapse in the relatively near future. All of this, one way or another, will also affect the course of military operations, the fighting. But this time needs to be used somehow. Look, I actually view all these things optimistically. Why? Because considering that the Germans have classified not only the transfer of missiles to Ukraine, but also all other equipment, shells, and weapons, and given that they have already authorized strikes wherever possible, this indicates that they have internally decided that war with Russia is inevitable and that they need to fight. They don't want to fight themselves. They don't want their soldiers to go and fight against Russia. And they have decided that it is necessary to fully equip the Ukrainian soldier with everything needed to destroy Russia, or more likely, to neutralize it. I think they have bet on neutralizing Vladimir Putin and his regime. The only question is, how long will it take?
A very interesting piece of news. Today, even on Nastoyaщее Время, you showed it too. It spread across all the Telegram channels. There you go. The people will tear you apart with their bare hands. Even the wives themselves will come and tear you apart. That's a quote. So, a volunteer showed how Russian soldiers on crutches, of course, are being kept in the basement of the 5th MSB to be sent on a deadly assault. The widow of a fallen soldier and volunteer of the Russian World Movement, Russian nationalist Anna Uvarova, published a video with soldiers who are members of the 5th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade. And she says that they're going to be eliminated, disposed of, and that no one will just sit and wait for them to come back as cargo 200. No one but Putin can stop this. There's a ton of swearing in there. And she said that they're sending Russians to be slaughtered, and if anything happens, the people will tear you apart with their bare hands. The wives themselves will come and tear you apart. And in general, it's the officials who should be dying, not ordinary Russian soldiers. You're taking away our husbands, fathers, and children. You are the cattle who should be going ahead of all the guys. But you're just sitting it out. End of quote. Do you think the people won't rise up? The people will tear you apart with their bare hands. The wives themselves will come and tear you apart. Here's another quote. Is this just a little warning bell that you shouldn't pay any attention to at all? Or is this the beginning of a powerful confrontation in Russia against the Kremlin?
This isn't a warning bell, it's nothing. Look, Dasha, there once was a truly important movement during the First Chechen War, when the mothers of conscripts, the mothers of those mobilized, came and demanded that Yeltsin put an end to it. And Yeltsin did end it because it was a very strong, unified movement. And back then, Russia was a completely different country. It was in a half-collapsed, impoverished state in dire straits. Something had to be done. And it was clear that such a war fought for money, a war initially waged by Korzhakov and the security services, it had to be ended. They finished it because this segment of the population rose up. The mothers, yes, who came and said, that's it. Remember when there was a similar situation with the conscripts? They sent conscripts to war, this time against Ukraine. And the conscripts' mothers started to speak out, and Putin immediately gave the order to rescue the conscripts and try to smooth over the situation somehow. They are afraid of this kind of movement. They remember what happened during the First Chechen War. They don't want anything like that to happen again. But when we talk, for example, about an initiative like the Wives of the Mobilized, they banged their pots in the kitchen, and that was the end of it. They went out to the Ministry of Defense a few times. They were told to shut up by the generals who came out to them, even the colonels who came out to them. And they did shut up. Nothing will come of this. Why won't anything happen? Because on the one hand, there are these dissatisfied wives of the mobilized whose husbands are being killed. And on the other hand, there are wives like that too. Not of the mobilized, but of those who were bought off. She gets married once, he's killed, she becomes a widow, gets the money. A second time she gets the money, a third time she gets the money. It's a whole business. It's a whole business. They all get bought off. Do you understand what the point is? It's not just some mobilized person who was grabbed, tied up, and sent off, and then went to kill. For the most part, these are people who wanted to get money for going to another territory, to a foreign country, and killing someone. They're willing to kill someone for money. They're mercenaries, just like Prigozhin, who was killed in the sky over Russia. Exactly the same kind of mercenaries, no different from that executioner. The only difference is that the executioner got billions. And they get a certain amount, a few million rubles, which are wiped out by inflation in Russia. They're killers just the same. That's why I don't believe in this whole movement of the mobilized soldiers' wives, that they'll come and do something like that. Putin will be removed only by his own elite. Right now, there are probably no conspirators in the Kremlin. But they could appear, they could show up when something collapses, when things start to fall apart. It will be a domino effect. When, as I repeat, there is a blow to the economy, a blow to oil, a blow at the front, and so on, it will all collapse, and Putin will be removed. But he understands perfectly well that he has no other way out of this situation except to continue the war. Because as long as he continues the war, Dasha, he can keep resetting everything and everyone. You've already heard once again from Tolstoy in the State Duma that they are planning to reset the constitution again, to rewrite the constitution, which he had already reset back in 2020. They are planning to reset it even more, to tighten things further. And what will follow the resetting of the constitution? Repressions, mass purges. For example, Shoigu is afraid, I am absolutely certain, to go out onto the streets of Moscow. Did you know he has 14 bodyguards who accompany him?
Yes, I would like to discuss that. Why wasn't he at the parade, and why did he suddenly increase his security detail to the number you mentioned last September, October? What is the reason for this? And a publication wrote that he is afraid of internal enemies, internal ones. Sasha.
He is afraid of Putin. He is afraid of Putin. He stole money right under Putin's nose, and he didn't share that money. Why did the confrontation arise between Prigozhin, Shoigu, and Gerasimov on the other side? Because of money. I was told the amount was $6 billion. That was the sum involved. They couldn't agree on how to split it. A confrontation began, which escalated to the point where Putin had to urgently leave, to flee Moscow. He packed his things, got on a plane, and left because his life was in danger, or at least that's what they thought. Or maybe they made up that danger for him. Because Prigozhin didn't want to kill Putin. It all just landed on him unexpectedly. He wanted to deal with Shoigu and Gerasimov. He had to have Putin killed by the hands of Prigozhin. Warren Jordan wrote about this. It's not my invention that it was Patrushev who actually killed Prigozhin. Patrushev was sidelined and sent off to deal with ships after that. Shoigu's people were eliminated. 8 out of 10 of Shoigu's deputies are under arrest in prison. One deputy, the 9th, is missing. She was the one responsible for the money. Now they want to get rid of Gerasimov, to dispose of him, because he's also a party to the conflict. And Shoigu walks around having acquired 14 bodyguards. He walks around in fear. And it's not just that he says he's cold and lonely. Shoigu knows perfectly well that tomorrow he might not wake up. He knows perfectly well that Putin could kill him. There are a huge number of people who want to finally tear apart Shoigu's empire. They've practically already done it. Because Shoigu is not just the Ministry of Defense and Contracts through Timur Ivanov. Shoigu is also the Ministry of Emergency Situations, which he protected, a huge, massive agency. You understand? Yes, Shoigu is the Ministry of Defense. Yes, Shoigu is about contracts. Yes, Shoigu is about various corruption schemes. Shoigu is the construction of Patriot Park for 20 billion rubles, which they embezzled. 20 billion rubles that they stole. Shoigu is about buying and selling weapons. Shoigu is about making money at the front. It's about sending drugs to the front, prostitutes to the front, black market weapons that were funneled to terrorists, to the Taliban, and so on. Shoigu was involved in this at the initial stage and made money from it together with Gerasimov and his generals. And it's not for nothing that he surrounded himself with these bodyguards. He understands perfectly well that Putin will take revenge on him for Prigozhin. Putin most likely had to kill Prigozhin. He personally gave that direct order. But I truly think that now he really regrets that he was forced to eliminate a person whom he genuinely considered to be working very effectively and efficiently for his interests. And he will seek revenge, and Shoigu knows this perfectly well.
So, in essence, this summer could be decisive for many players connected to Prigozhin and the Russian army.
I think so, yes. Now, Kadyrov has started talking. He released some kind of video. Whether he's sick or not, he was also part of this game. He didn't make it there at the time.
I wanted to ask you about Kadyrov. So now he's come out, started talking about life and death, some philosophical sayings. Sasha, I listened to it. What for? Why? Why all of a sudden?
Listen, I think Kadyrov is just sending a signal. Literally just a few weeks ago, a month ago, there were rumors that Kadyrov would soon be removed, right? I think they wanted to remove him. He has a huge number of enemies. Yes, he's being helped by Zolotov, the head of the National Guard, former bodyguard of Sobchak, and in a sense, an aide to Putin. But the FSB is against Kadyrov, military intelligence is against Kadyrov, the GRU is against Kadyrov, right? The Ministry of Defense, the General Staff, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the Investigative Committee represented by Bastrikin, the Prosecutor's Office, all of these are people who are against Kadyrov. These are the clans that oppose Kadyrov. And now he's simply signaling to them, well, guys, look, I went to see Putin and got a renewed mandate to rule, and there's nothing you can do to me. I think that's roughly how this necessary signal from Ramzan Kadyrov should be interpreted. But all those people who in one way or another were involved in this conflict with Prigozhin and in the outcome that concerned Prigozhin have either been neutralized, eliminated, or are under constant pressure. So yes, the infighting and purges will continue. And Putin's vendetta has not stopped. It will go on and he will see it through. He will gradually destroy all of these people. And he will do it.
Sasha, our audience is asking you, since we do a stream with you every week, I've noticed they're writing and asking you to give a brief forecast of what might happen this week. That is before our next meeting with you. What do you think? A brief forecast, a mini forecast from top analyst Oleksandr Demchenko?
I think that Trump will not introduce anything significant regarding Russia, and he himself will try to get out of the war in the near future. And the Europeans obviously will begin urgently supplying Ukraine with missiles and other long-range munitions in order to strengthen it before the summer offensive. I think that a series of sabotage operations will begin in the near future. We will see a huge number of them in the next week or week and a half at railway junctions, tracks, and so on. And it's worth expecting, though not in the coming week but in the longer term, an even greater intensification of drone warfare, both against Russia and against Ukraine.
Friends, please like this video. Top analyst Oleksandr Demchenko and I meet every week. This is the Sasha plus Dasha segment where we discuss key events and hope that if a major event suddenly happens, we'll do a special broadcast, but usually it's once a week. Friends, subscribe to my channel. Yes, take care. Let us know in the comments what you think about the situation overall, your forecasts, your opinions, your analysis. Oleksandr Demchenko, top analyst. Sasha, thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye.